Hello, everyone. My name is Victor Mwanga. Today is December 17th, Friday, 9 a.m. Pacific. Today, we're going to talk about a very timely topic, I should say, and it's been a timely topic for a while, and it's about cybersecurity hiding manager and practices. And today, I brought a guest speaker, Kip Boyle, who actually running a project, open source, if you believe it or not. It's more like, and he will talk about it more in detail if I ruin that. Cybersecurity Hiding Manager Handbook. Kip Boyle has been a cybersecurity professional and CISO since 2003. He's an experienced hiding manager of cybersecurity, information security professionals, having interviewed about, I would say, hundreds of them over the years and hiring dozens for his team. Recognizing challenges of finding and retaining talented cybersecurity people, Kip recruited a team of 50 volunteers and recently published the book I just mentioned, Cybersecurity Hiding Manager Handbook. Again, it's an open source project under the Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 International License. Kip, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Victor. I'm really happy to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and share with your audience.
Great. While we jump right into it, Kip, will you give us thumbnail sketch of you and your work and what we just talked about this handbook?
Yes. Well, who am I? Well, I'm a husband and I'm also a dad. My wife and I have 6 kids, and we live in the greater Seattle area. And my family is a really important part of how I see myself and my everyday existence. So that's really important to me. In terms of the subject matter at hand here, I think it's important for people to know that I work in 2 major problem spaces. So one problem space is I've been working in for a long time, and that's helping companies remove cybersecurity obstacles so that they can thrive. I believe that's the true mission for those of us that work in cybersecurity and information security, is to help our organizations thrive, despite the fact that we have all these challenges, which the senior decision makers typically don't really understand very well, and they depend on us. So I work in that problem space. I have a podcast called the Cyber Risk Management Podcast, which I publish with my co-host Jake Bernstein. He's a cybersecurity and privacy attorney, and so if you want to hear a CISO and an attorney kind of talk to each other about what's the most relevant things going on these days, I would encourage you to tune in. And I've been a CISO for an insurance company, and today I work as a virtual chief information security officer, and I have many companies that I help. So that's one big problem space I work in. Now, the problem space, the second one, is really what's relevant to what we're talking about today, and that is I'm trying to help build a bridge, because there's this massive gap between cybersecurity job seekers and the cybersecurity hiring managers. And it started that my whole work in that space kind of started because, as you said, I needed to find people to join my team because we had a lot of work that we needed to get done. So I had to figure out, how does that work? And most people in my situation don't ever really get trained on how to find talent. All they really get told how to do is to avoid getting lawsuits. So, it's a learn as you go kind of thing. So that's how I got involved in this space. But then eventually, a couple of years ago, what I realized was people were asking me more and more, how do I break into cybersecurity? And I was giving them the best answers I could give them off the cuff. And I thought, well, that's not good. If I'm going to help somebody, I really should help them. So I went onto the internet and I said, there must be somebody out there who I can, maybe who's wrote a fantastic blog post or whatever. And I can send people who ask me that question. I can send them to this other person who's really put a lot of time and energy and, can really do a good job answering their question. But Victor, I didn't find anybody out there at the time that I looked. I couldn't find anyone who was talking about how do you get into cybersecurity from a hiring manager's point of view? And that's what I really wanted to share. And so out of frustration, I said, you know what, I'm going to have to build an entire online course to share with people what is it that hiring managers want, so that when you're job seeking, you can be aware of that, and then you can help them. So I've got a podcast. Yes, I have two podcasts. My other one's called Your Cyberpath, and my co-host is Jason Dion, who's a very experienced provider of certification preparation courses. And then we also have an online course called Hired in 21 Days. Now, I'm not here to promote those. I just want you to know that that's kind of how I got into this second problem space. I'm very active in that problem space, and I'm working with people who are trying to get into the career. But Victor, as I was helping people, one of the things that I realized is that hiring managers are also struggling. It's not just people looking for jobs, it's people trying to find talented people to join their teams. And so again, I went out and I said, where is there a voice on the internet helping cybersecurity hiring managers with all these challenges? And again, I couldn't find one. And so I thought, right, it looks like I'm going to have to build something for them too. And that's when we, said we're gonna write this handbook.
First of all, I will say hats off. Second, you got to tell me your time management skills because six kids, two challenges that you're trying to solve, they are almost like I would say turning the earth. And
It's delegation. It's delegation. It really is. Me trying to practice what I preach, so to speak, which is you need talented people to come next to you and to help you because there's just no other way to get it done.
yeah, give me a little bit of motivation about why open source project. I mean, why open source? You could have made money off of it and maybe kept it closed. So why open source?
Uh, Boy, I that's something I did wrestle with. Well, this is not my first book. My first book I wrote for the first problem space that I work in, which is around, removing cybersecurity obstacles for businesses who want to thrive. And so I wrote that book. It's called Fire Doesn't Innovate. As I wrote that book, I was challenged by some customers and some people who are helping me write the book. And they said, if you really want to do well, you need to be generous. You need to share. You need to share how you do your work. And I thought, well, that makes me feel uncomfortable because this is kind of how I make my money, right? This is how I live. This is how I provide for my family and the causes that I think are important to me. And I thought, should I really give all that away? And ultimately, I gave a lot of it away. I didn't give everything away, but I gave a lot of it away. And you know what? It worked. It was a success. And so I learned by taking a risk that it was worth doing. And so when this second book came around, I said, you know what? I'm going to just throw myself into this this philosophy of just being generous and sharing. And so that was one big motivation for why I did it as open source. But Victor, the other reason why I did it is because, I know what works for me when it comes to building teams, but I don't have a monopoly on how to do it. Like, there's lots of different ways to do it. And people are working in all kinds of different contexts, right? Cybersecurity hiring managers. And so I thought, well, if I really want to write a great handbook, I need people to come and contribute because I just can't possibly cover everything. And so it was really those two ideas put together that made me realize I needed to do this as an open source project and I needed to invite people in.
Yeah, I really need to send you my PO box, and you can share with those people who told you to keep it open source, and you need to share and not make money.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I am probably going to be able to make money from the handbook, not from selling the handbook, but Victor, what's happened is that some people have come to me and they've said, we want to do this. Like we want to do what's in the handbook, but we're so busy. We can't, we don't have time to read it page by page, cover to cover, think deeply, and then, do all this stuff. And so I've been invited by Wild West Hacking Fest, which is an organization that puts on conferences and online training, to create a course based on the handbook, and so that people can come and learn what's in the handbook through a guided experience.
I follow John Strand religiously, not even more socially. It's every time he talks, I want to listen.
Well, John was the one that invited me to come and do that, and John's been I really love John's vision for the cybersecurity community and what he's trying to do with Wild West Hacking Fest, and so he's a kind of a hero of mine. I'm inspired by him. He did me the great favor of being a guest on my podcast recently. So we're going to release an episode soon where he is going to tell people what does it take to become a network penetration tester. So I hope people will check that out.
Going to definitely, I can tell you that right now. I'm definitely going to check it out. As I said, that anytime he talks anywhere, I am on it. I have actually a Feedly search anywhere on the internet. I see John Strand. I want to listen, read, watch. So in an equation here, right? Cybersecurity hiring manager handbook in any hiring. So let's take that word out of this equation. We have two parties. We have interviewee and interviewer.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it important for the interviewee to know the interviewer's expectations?
Oh my gosh, you've really put your finger on something super, super important. Well, all right, this is what I teach people who come to me and say, Kip, will you help me get into cybersecurity? And sometimes, Victor, they come to me and they say, like, I want to get promoted, or, I've been a SOC analyst now for a while. I've been working in the security operations center, and I want a different job now. I want to go do pen testing, or I want to do blue team stuff or whatever. And so they ask me, like, what should I do? And so what I tell them is that, well, what you're really asking me is, how do I market and sell myself? Because when you go get a job or you're asking for a promotion, that's a big part of it, right? You need to be somebody who can solve problems, no doubt about that. You need skills, you need hard skills, you need soft skills. All that is a given. But here's the thing that I've noticed is that if you can also see this as a sales and marketing challenge, not in a sleazy, slimy, salesy way. I'm not saying that at all. But there are some very, very ethical, very, very professional ways to think about selling and marketing. The way I think about it is I am trying to find people who need my help, the things that I can do, right? That is sales and marketing. It's creating conversations with people, finding out people who have needs that I can help them with, all right? That's all it is. At the bottom of all discussion, it really just comes down to, you want to serve somebody. So if you want to serve a future boss, then you need to understand what their pain is, and you need to be able to empathize with their pain, and more importantly, you need to be able to explain to them, and using words that they can understand, how you're going to help them with those pains. If you can do that, you will become absolutely irresistible. Hiring managers will see you and listen to you, and they will think you're catnip to a cat. All right. They will want you on your team, on their team. I guarantee you.
Yeah, and that's fair, right? I mean, again, we always talk about the importance and for the people who are looking for the job, at the same time, people who wants to hire. So now let's flip the tables, right? As an interview I go in and I search for a job. I do a little bit of research about the company, about the job, about the role, about what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And for interviewer, if I'm on the other side, and again, this is the part about hiring managers.
Yes.
When they get that resume, what is the motivation for the interviewer to interview a candidate? Other than, I guess, filling the spot, what else inspires them?
Well, let's not undervalue what you just said. Okay. Think about, let me give you a little bit of a behind the scenes tour, all right, of what's going on there in that situation. So in order for me to even, as a hiring manager, to even get to the point where I can hold a resume in my hand and seriously consider bringing somebody in for an interview, I've had to do a lot of work. If the role is new, for example, if I'm trying to fill a brand new position, I've had to work really hard, probably for 6 months, to convince my boss that that my team deserves another seat. And that's no small thing. That's a big deal. There's massive commitment on the side of the organization to funding a new staff position. And I have a lot of political capital on the line. I've gone to my boss and I've made a business case that that we should hire somebody. And my boss has trusted me, has decided that they're going to trust me to get this done. I think hiring is one of the most strategic and one of the most important tasks that a manager can do. And so if you think about how it even got to the place where I could even look at a resume, you'll realize that I'm on a limb, right? I'm out on a limb. I'm taking a big risk because if I do a mishire, if I get this wrong, I'm going to lose a lot of political capital and I'm going to have spent a lot of company money and resources, and there will be a massive false start. And that's not good for me. It's not good for my reputation. It's not good for my team. I've already attracted a number of people who have come around me and said, Kip, we want to help you get this mission done. A mishire is awful for them, because it's going to be distracting. It's going to take away from their experience on their job, their ability to do great work. There's a lot on the line in order for me to do that. So my motivation is to make a great hire and to think deeply about the person that I'm going to bring on and to make sure that they're going to have a good experience. Because when you have a mishire, Victor, the candidate is also going to lose. It's going to be a terrible, dreadful, awful thing for them. That they're going to spend a lot of time trying to recover from, right? So, I think I've made my case. I hope I have that there's a lot going on here. So, a hiring manager has a lot of motivations, right? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think it's a very hard job to decide on something and someone just by listening and meeting them in person. And these days it's all virtual. It's a very tough job, in my opinion.
Extremely difficult. But if you do it well, you're going to fail. It's inevitable that you're going to get it wrong sometimes, right? No matter how hard you try, because this is not a deterministic process, right? You don't put in 1+1 on one side and get 2 on the other. Sometimes you put 1+1 in on one side, you get 0 or -1 on the other side because that's a mishire. But sometimes you put 1+1 into one side and you get 5, right? And that's when it's magic.
Great hire. I think the way I see it, to be honest with you, I mean, I interview folks here and there, and I always feel that it's an art. It's an art
Mm-hmm.
to really read the body language, read the person. And it's not always to your point, where it's 1+1 is 2. You really don't just look at the resume and ask them questions about what they have put it. You also want to get to know them, their personality,
Yes.
their motivation, especially the team collaboration part. I know a lot of great technical minds, and they're really smart, but they fall on their face when it comes to team building, team
Yes.
collaboration, because they just and that's where the hiring manager comes in as well, where they might have chosen that, hey, I need this skill at the cost of where my team might not be happy with this person. I mean,
Oh
you can
yeah.
go to any office and you can ask who's the biggest a-hole in the company, and they'll all point to this one person. And
Yeah.
you can ask who's the best person you want to work with, and they'll all point to one person.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one of those things, and they all boils down to how did hiring manager get to know these traits just by looking at resume, where nobody puts in that I'm a team player. Nobody
Right.
puts in that I actually collaborated, or I'm empath, or I will go above and beyond. It's not something you put it on a resume or CV. It's something hiring manager get to know
Yeah. Yeah.
by
Boy,
talking to you, listening to you.
Victor, you're putting your finger right on it. This is exactly why the handbook, the Cybersecurity Hiring Manager's Handbook, this is why we wrote it, because everything you just said is true, but it's also an art. It's difficult. And especially when you first start, nobody really teaches you this stuff. I've rarely met a person who
Exactly.
who felt that when they first started hiring people were set up for success. So it's very, very difficult. And I also want to focus on one thing in particular that you talked about, is that there's 2 basic philosophies I think that a hiring manager can take. They can take a get butts in seats philosophy, right, which is where you hire for hard skills and
Yep.
you're all about outcomes. And and that can lead to the kinds of problems that you talked about, where you get jerks and you piss off the rest of the team, and then the overall team's productivity suffers. There's whole books out there called the no a-hole rule, right? Is how common that is and how maddening that can be. So you can take a button seats approach. I don't recommend it. Sometimes you have to, though, either on an exception basis, or if that's just the way your entire organization works, you're not going to get much support to do anything differently. But the handbook really encourages people to shoot for long-term success by taking a talent first approach. All right. And what that means is that you're trying to hire people who have skills that cannot be taught. Right. You're trying to hire people who do all those things you said, like you're a team player and, and you care about the people on your team and you've got these soft skills that are going to make it easier for you to not only work with your team, but also talk to your internal customers and other people that, stakeholders that depend on you. Now that's harder. That's much harder to do, because you're trying to assess intangibles, but the hiring manager handbook is trying to help people with that exactly. And I think if you can take that approach, you're gonna be much better off in the long run.
Yeah, and I'm on the bit of different philosophy on when it comes to that part because sometimes as a hiring manager, I need skill specific persons.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I don't have a I would say privilege or leisure
Yes.
that I can have someone team player, nice, talented, empath, and all that. I need an attorney who wins the case. I need a doctor or surgeon
Mm-hmm.
who fixes my brain or heart. I
Right.
don't have time that, or I can't afford to have a person or a doctor or a lawyer that who's really good and empath with all the patients, but really not good at their job because they're just getting up to speed. So
Yes.
trade-off when it comes to as a hiring manager, again, it's an art. You need to decide. It's a skill specific role that you're gonna trade off the other aspects,
Mm-hmm.
or is it something that the longer run you think that your team and the morale and the motivation and the again the cold wars within teams that you're gonna want to avoid. Again, as a
Yes.
hiring manager, as a manager, conflicts are come. That's your part of the role, the part of the job that you have to resolve conflicts, but can you avoid it by hiring the right people up front?
Yeah. Boy, you're right, and I want to acknowledge that you're right in the sense that we can't always take a talent first approach. Sometimes we just have to get the right skills into a certain situation because it's critical and it's a no lose situation. And so the hiring manager handbook that we wrote acknowledges that, and it is very upfront about that. When you go and check out the hiring manager handbook, and I'm going to encourage everybody in the audience to do that, no matter what your role is. But what you're going to see up front is we've got a set of what we call ideals, right? What are the hiring ideals? Now, we don't call them principles and we don't call them commandments or anything like that. What we say is that when you can operate to these ideals, when it's possible, then you're going to be able to take a talent first approach, and you're going to be able to actually see hiring as in the sense of a life cycle, right? And that's very powerful. But you can't always do that, and you're never going to be able to live every ideal that we talk about in the handbook. And so the challenge becomes, I think, how often can you take a talent first approach, but don't berate yourself when you can't always do
Yeah, yeah. So I'll tell you a joke and then I'll ask you a question.
it.
One of my friend actually went and performed an interview. He was actually applying for a job and he went in as a candidate and he was pretty excited. So the hiring manager asked him that, hey, why are you applying for a job or why do you need this job or why should I hire you? And he's like, you know what? Forget about that question. Tell me why the last guy left. So
Yeah.
now, my question to you is it important? And I hope it's okay for the hiring manager to talk about retention as well. How are they keeping people? Why did the previous guy left?
Hmm. I, you know, okay, it it takes a certain amount of courage for a hiring manager to talk like that with a candidate. If the person left because, if they quit because the working conditions were awful, as a hiring manager, you certainly don't want to say that, right? You're not motivated to say that to a candidate. So I get it. Like it can be really tough to talk about specifics like that, and sometimes you just can't, right? Especially if the person leaves under less than good terms, and possibly there's some legal issues that you have to manage to, and so you really can't talk about it. But just the topic of retention in general, I think hiring managers absolutely should be talking about that. But I also think that they should have realistic expectations. So what I tell people is, first of all, don't be afraid to look at a person's resume and look at their work history, and say, well, I see that you've been changing employers on average every 18 to 36 months. Tell me about that. Why why is that going on with you? And you can say to them, like, I'm searching for somebody who's going to want to stay and grow with this team. How does that sound to you? So I think it should be as open of a conversation as it can possibly be. But let me talk to you about another thing that I think that hiring managers are not very realistic about, which is people eventually leave. They do. And you cannot have this attitude. I don't believe it's healthy to have this attitude of like, you're dead to me, like you're some kind of a betrayer because you leave. You've been here for 3 years and now you're leaving, and you're being disrespectful or whatever. I think that's an awful way to treat a person who's leaving. Most people will leave you because, not because you're an ogre. I hope that's not why they leave, but usually on when it's healthy and good, they leave because they want to grow and they need new challenges. And so when that happens, I say celebrate. Tell them like, oh, I'm so sorry I don't have a challenge here for you, but I see that you do need more challenges that I cannot provide. So congratulations, you've graduated from this learning laboratory that we have here, and I'm going to celebrate you as a graduate of our program, and I'm going to send you off with my best wishes. Now, Victor, that's hard to do, and I'm doing that right
All
now.
right. It
I'm
takes a
doing that
lot of
right.
courage, maturity level. I mean,
Yes.
it doesn't come natural,
No.
especially the new managers, because they are relying on those resources for a long time. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, I gotta go find a new person, equally talented, train them, then get it started
I
again. So
know.
it takes a lot of
I'm going
courage.
through that right now, Victor. Somebody just announced to me that they're leaving my team. And this is a person I have depended on. And I am simultaneously thrilled for this person. It's a woman who has been on our team for 2 years and has done some spectacular work. And if it were up to me, I would love to see her stay, for a long, long time. But she's leaving, and and it's because I can't give her the challenges that she needs anymore. And it's going to be painful. I'm having conversations, about transitioning tasks, and my gosh, how are we ever going to find somebody as good as she is? And it's really, really difficult. But I'm going to tell you this: if you can think of recruiting and team building as a life cycle, well, then it should be easy for you to understand what I'm about to say. When somebody leaves your team, they're going to tell people what it was like to be on your team. Now you have a choice.
Yeah.
You can have them talk about how great it was to be on your team and how they sent you off with flowers and confetti and music and celebration. Or you can treat them like dirt and have them tell everybody what an awful person you are and how you should never go to work for them, and try to recruit in that environment.
Yeah, and one of the things that I always encourage to my peers or people I work with, or at least that I feel that I'm close to, that don't treat that you are putting your direct reports or people you're working with in a cage. It's not a thing.
Mm-mm.
In a way,
No.
actually, you want to question if someone is within the same role, they don't want to evolve, they don't want to train, they don't want to grow. After certain time, when we do these yearly reviews, instead of having those check mark, you want to have an open conversation that, hey, why are you not training? Why are you not growing? Why are you not evolving? Why are you like getting to the next? What's your next? Like this can't be your next.
Right.
Challenge them. I think this is where it takes, again, a lot of courage as a manager, telling your direct report that I love having you in my team. At the same time, I want you to grow out of it. And I think one of the ideologies that I always tell, at least the executives, that have this in your mind that someone in your team should be putting you out of the job.
Yeah.
So instead of they leaving you, putting you out of the job so that you go do something bigger and better, because we all admit it, we all have something we want to do
Yes.
next after a certain time, because that's what excites as a human. So
Yes.
there should be no shame about it, I think.
I agree with you very much, very, very much agree with you on this. And but I can only encourage, right? I can only encourage people to take this mindset. But if you do, I think things will go much better for you. I think it'll be easier for you to recruit new folks. I think your reputation as a wonderful place to work will only result in good things happening to you. And it's a paradox, isn't it? Right? The tighter you hold on to something, the more likely it is you're going to lose it.
Well, speaking of paradox, and this is my last question for you for this session, and we'll bring you again. I think this conversation is very interesting to just end with one session. Again, speaking of paradox, as a manager, and especially in industry like cybersecurity, where you can't give specific information about your uh, tools and the platforms and technologies you're using, because then the bad guys or adversaries are going to find out, they're going to try to exploit it. So you can't put any, or I would say too much technical details about your company and about the role that you're looking for, and yet expecting and hoping to find equally talented and skilled person who just left you. So how does that work out? And again, speaking of paradox.
Well, okay, so I understand this this problem, and here's what I tell people. Okay, yes, cyber attackers are using open source intelligence, right, OSINT, to learn about you so they can exploit you. And yes, it's something to be concerned about. Okay, so let's acknowledge that. Now, if you're a person who's been in this career field for any length of time, you should know that there are principles of design that inform us as to how we should build our security mechanisms. There are several principles like defense in depth, right? We've probably all heard that, and there's others. Okay, well, there's one security design principle. It's called open design. And what that means is that the security of a mechanism should not depend on its secrecy, the secrecy of its design or the secrecy of its implementation, right? That's an ideal. That's a security engineering principle that we should strive for. And so if that's true, then your need to find great candidates and to reveal certain details in order to find them, if you're practicing open design, then I would say it's more important for you to reveal the information that is necessary and to trust in your design work that even if people know these things about you, that you're not giving away the store.
Yeah, I don't know if a whole lot of people are actually adopting that philosophy, to be honest, but I think that, again, that's ideal. And I hope you cover that in your book so people can actually learn about it.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's so much to this, isn't there, Victor? There's so much to talk about. And that's why we wrote an entire handbook, because there's just so much to say. And I'm glad that it's freely available to everybody. Can I tell them the URL so they can check it out?
Absolutely. And we will put it in the show notes as well.
Right. Okay. So I used a link shortener, and the full URL, we'll put it in the show notes, but I made this myself. So if you go to b.link, so that's b.link, and then /hiring-handbook, b.link /hiring-handbook, and that'll take you right to our website. And what we've done is the handbook is actually hosted on GitHub. All right. It's all in Markdown. And so we created another website that takes all that Markdown and actually publishes it in a very, very pleasant to read experience, as opposed to going to GitHub and and looking at the Markdown files, which are a little bit
You
tougher
just
to.
pissed off almost 39 folks on this call that Markdown is not pleasant looking.
Well, listen, not everybody thinks it's very pleasant to look at, and it's a big handbook. There's a lot of content in there. But if you don't mind reading a Markdown, well, then be my guest. Go to GitHub and grab it. Right, make a copy of the repo, put it on your local machine, and while you're reading it, you better mark it up. Right, I want you to contribute. I want you to challenge. I want you to tell us where we got it wrong. I want you to tell us what we're missing, and then I want you to submit a change request. And I want to see your contribution.
Absolutely. I think that would be my call to action for community and listeners, that if once you go through it, not even with, if once you go through the book, please contribute to it, give your feedback so that Kip continues doing what this crazy mission he had started, along with the other challenges and 6 kids he's handling. So kudos to Kip.
Come on, join my team. Just do a little something, okay?
Kip, any last words for our audience about embracing your book, or additional advice you may have for the hiring managers out there?
Yeah. So for hiring managers, go read the ideals. Try every day to take a talent lifecycle approach to building your teams. But don't beat yourself up if you have to take a button seats approach sometime. Like I get it, and it's not a perfect world, but strive, right? And if you're a job seeker, then go get that handbook and study it, right? Because that's gonna. I mean, you're practically reading the playbook of the other team, aren't you? If you can do that, right? Wouldn't you love to read the playbook of your adversary? I'm not saying that hiring managers are your opponent, but there's a lot of things that you just don't understand about being a hiring manager, and I think the more you understand them, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, and I'll re-emphasize on that part as well. In good negotiations, people prepare themselves. The best negotiations, they get to know what the other party is bringing on the table. I think this is one of those situations where you, as a candidate, if you know the mindset, you know the philosophy, you know about what hiring manager is gonna be thinking about when they're interviewing you, I think you're better armed than without it. So once again, what Kip said, go in, read the book, contribute to it, and get into the mindset where you are actually aligning and same wavelength with hiring managers.
Thank you for having me on the show, Victor. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much, Kip. And again, as I said, we'll bring you back with the fun and investing conversation. This can't be ending right here. So, but this session is ending. Thanks so much, Kip. Appreciate it. For those of you who are ready to check out Cybersecurity Hiring Manager Handbook, the links are in the show notes. Once again, thank you so much for listening. Thanks, Kip.
You're welcome.